Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Today on Earth Focus, an interview with Dr. Michael McCracken, Chief Scientist for Climate Change Programs at the Climate Institute. Dr. McCracken was one of the experts who presented the United Nations Environment Programme's Climate Change Science Compendium to the public in September 2009. This report, based on the latest science, says that climate change is happening faster and on a larger scale than predicted just 2 years ago by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He speaks with Link TV correspondent Miles Benson about climate change and the impact that it will have. Coming up on Earth Focus.
Looking at the most recent UNEP report and the science that went into it, what are the most important new findings in your judgment?
This was a report trying to convey information about why this issue is significant, why it's significant to you, and to point out that there are new results coming in that, as they have been over the years, saying, and it looks like things are getting worse faster than we thought they were. And that's because, in part, scientists were sort of being cautious in their predictions, and then it turned out the world is proving that, yeah, indeed, some of the impacts are occurring more rapidly and more severely than we had thought.
Can you point to one or two or three that you regard as the most dramatic examples that are in the compendium?
Well, the most obvious ones, I think, relate to the ice. I mean, first, sea ice is melting back much more rapidly than we had thought it would, much more rapidly than models had been projecting it would. Another one is Greenland. I mean, if you look at the IPCC's report in 2007, it was suggesting that the net effect of Greenland and Antarctica on sea level over the entire 21st century with this few degree warming was going to be essentially balanced out. That is, you get some melting on Greenland and you get more snow on Antarctica because the air's so cold. If you warm it up a little bit, you get more snow. What we're seeing already is that both are losing ice, and they're losing ice more rapidly than they thought would occur for basically the whole century. Greenland was thought to be resistant to melting because it was ice up on land, up on top of mountains. So you have to warm the air before you can melt the ice. But it turns out the weight of the ice is so much it's pushed the interior of Greenland's land surface down below sea level, and there's these fjords where the oceans can sort of get at the ice and where the ice can stream out. And that's where the accelerated loss of ice on Greenland is occurring.
The ice melt and the seas rise.
And the seas rise. And in addition to the IPCC's estimate of a rise of maybe a foot or two over the next 100 years due to melting mountain glaciers and expansion of the ocean, that the loss of ice from Greenland and Antarctica would probably cause another 3 feet of sea level rise. That's 4 feet or 5 feet of sea level rise over 100 years. I mean, that's just a tremendous amount if you live in Florida or Bangladesh or Louisiana or a whole bunch of coastal areas, or New York City. Yeah, or New York City. New York City subways are protected against sea level rise of about water coming up by about 7 feet, 7 or 8 feet. And when you get waves and you get other things and you get storms pushing water in, you'll easily go above that if you get this kind of sea level rise. You can protect part of New York with barriers like the Thames Barrier, but it's not at all clear you can protect whole areas along Long Island, and you just can't protect in any way that we know with levees like the Netherlands has done.
If we don't make the right choices, that means the mistakes will be fatal for some number of people. Is that a fair statement, or is that an overstatement?
No, I think that's probably a fair statement. I mean, I think we see some indications of what can happen in particular regions. What we're seeing in the drought in Africa and what's happening, there are going to be some regions that are going to become very difficult for people to survive, and people are going to try and move and go to other places. What happened in New Orleans was another example or something. I mean, eventually, even if the seawalls had been built well, eventually that coastal land to the south, that delta land, was going to be decayed away. About 25 square miles a year has been washed away, and eventually the ocean was going to be up against New Orleans. And at some time you were going to have to evacuate some of these coastal cities. You're just going to have to retreat from them ultimately. It's just going to be very hard to protect against hurricane storm surges. So you're going to have relocations. Those cause all kinds of changes and disruption.
You've been in China recently, and of course, the United States can't solve these problems by unilateral action. It's going to require global cooperation. China's going to have to be part of that. What have you seen over there that maybe makes you feel a little optimistic?
Well, I think China's working on a lot of things to make it better for their people. One area has been air pollution. When I was there 5 years ago in October, it was sort of a special holiday time, and one of the things they'd done is invited over the French Air Force acrobatic team to put on shows in the capital. They couldn't fly in Beijing or in Shanghai, in those cities. When I was there this October,
They couldn't fly for
they
what?
couldn't fly because you couldn't see. You couldn't see more than about a block, and so they just couldn't fly. I think the Chinese were basically embarrassed by that situation. They knew the air pollution was bad. They knew the Olympics were coming up. They had to do something. When I was there this October, most of the time you could actually get a sense that there was a blue sky. Sometimes you could even see the mountains around the city. I mean, they're taking major actions by moving and changing industry, by changing their vehicles. What was important about this UNEP report, and what a number of us have been pushing at in recent articles, to say that CO2 is certainly one we certainly have to work on, but there's another whole set of non-CO2 greenhouse gases that we also have to work on that will contribute as much warming influence over the 21st century as CO2 emissions during the 21st century. Now, CO2 has a long tail, so it's really important, but emissions of methane and of air pollutants and of black carbon and these other things, we've got to get an important step that developing countries can take is to work really hard on these. And I think you're seeing signs in China, we're seeing signs in China that they are. I mean, they're going to higher mileage vehicles, they're cleaning up the black carbon, partly because it has other benefits. I mean, it reduces the air pollution in their cities and the health effects that come from it. So there are real reasons to clean up a lot of these other gases and make important progress there, as they sort of have to figure out how to transition from CO2 over to something else. But the developed world has not shown that a modern society can prosper on low or no CO2 emissions. We just haven't invested the effort to do that, and we have to.
Dr. McCracken, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world. To learn more, visit linktv.org.